Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, ISO 22000-2018 and FSSC version 5, What Will Change at Your Site? This webinar will be hosted by Kris Middleton of Eurofins, along with Cor Groenveld and Jacqueline Southey of FSSC 22000. I'm Genevieve Randall, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Before we begin, I'll let you know more about how this webinar will run. The webinar is being recorded, and the slides and recording will be available for you within 3 business days. A short Q&A session will follow the presentation to answer any viewer-submitted questions. During the webinar, you can submit questions you have using the webinar sidebar menu. Select the Questions tab, type in your question, then hit the Enter key on your keyboard. Remember, you can submit questions throughout the presentation, so feel free to send in a question whenever you have one. Okay, and now I'll give a quick overview of Eurofins. Eurofins is driven by our mission to contribute to global health by offering the highest quality testing, training, auditing, and consulting services. We strive to listen to our customers and not simply meet but exceed their expectations. Our footprint is global, with 35,000 staff and 400 laboratories across 44 countries, and a portfolio of over 150,000 analytical methods. Eurofins provides a unique range of analytical testing services to the pharmaceutical, food, environmental, and consumer products industries and to government. Eurofins Food Safety Systems provides support to the food industry through their public, on-site, and online training courses, consulting services including gap analysis, risk assessment and label review, and also by conducting audits. Now we're going to pause for a quick polling question. And the question is, which GFSI benchmarked ISO standard do you currently hold a certificate to? And I will launch the question now, and you can send in your responses. Select from one of the answer choices, and I will leave the poll open for about 30 seconds before I close it and share the anonymous results. Okay, and here are the results. With 48% with FSSC 22000 or ISO 22000. Okay, and now I will pass the presentation off to Jacqueline.
Good morning. And this is Jacqueline Southey, and I'm calling from a very wet Washington, D.C. this morning. I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who's joining this webinar. And I'd like to thank Eurofins for this opportunity to present to you today. So if I have the power of technology, I'd like to start the webinar. So it's my pleasure to represent FSSC in North America, and I will just give you if I can do this, thank you. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to give a brief introduction to FSSC 22000 to explain a little bit about how it works, what the benefits are, and why the update to ISO 22000 in 2018 is so important. Essentially, FSSC 22000 is a certification scheme for the food industry that certifies a facility's food safety management systems. It's a little bit more than just an audit program that assesses a product. It actually certifies the way a company produces, say, food. So it's a process system, and It uses the independent international ISO standards, and that's a very important tool for the food industry. The international standards are written by consensus. They are recognized all over the world, and they provide a framework for the food safety management. FSSC is a little bit unique in that it is owned and governed by a non-profit foundation. We are also independent. We have no conflict of interest, and all the funds that we generate are put back into the governance and maintenance of FSSC 22000. FSSC 22000 is benchmarked by the GFSI, and we're very pleased to have just recently updated our benchmarking over the last month, and our version 4.2 has been 4.1 has been benchmarked by GFSI. And that's also a key element of FSSC 22000. FSSC 22000 makes ISO 22000 into a certification program that can be benchmarked by the GFSI. On its own, ISO 22000 is not benchmarked by GFSI. We have a very robust integrity program, and as a global certification scheme, this is extremely important. We have to have confidence in our certification program all over the world, and our users have to know that a certification that is issued in one part of the world is equivalent and consistent with one that is issued in the other side of the world. So we are very important. We are very our integrity program is very important to us, and because we're global, and because we are operating in all over the world, and because we use the ISO 22000 management systems, we're accepted and recognized by many of the large manufacturers. We are driven by a lot of the demands by the manufacturers, and as I said, we make the management program available to them and benchmarkable by the GFSI. So it's very important to many of the major manufacturers operating all over the world, and provides a common language for facilities that are operating throughout the globe. We have a growing recognition now amongst the world food authorities. In some parts of the world, the ISO systems are actually incorporated into the regulations, and we maintain a dialogue with many of the regulatory authorities as the food safety certification and food safety systems are being updated. And because we are working with ISO and being continuously updated, we are working towards continuous improvement and hoping to improve food safety globally. We also have a global markets program, which allows initial stage of the smaller, less developed facilities get the first step onto the road to certification. So we work with small, medium enterprises, helping them, training them, and helping them to understand the certification process and get them onto the ladder of certification. So that's essentially what FSSC 22000 is. It's a global certification scheme, and we really are very global. We're working with 110 certification bodies all over the world and 1,500 auditors. And that explains why our integrity program is extremely important. We need to make sure that everybody is consistent, is understanding the requirements, and is working in harmony to produce a consistent certification program. We have 40 accreditation bodies, which provides an additional oversight of our certification bodies, and we're operating in 154 countries. And probably the way that our certification is split up, we're probably about a third in Asia, a third in Europe, and a third in the Americas. And so again, this provides an indication of how global we are and how we are working towards improving sort of food safety throughout the world. We also have representatives around the world. We're developing our market development program, and I represent FSSC in North America. We have a representative in South America, and we have a representative in Japan, again, which is helping our communication, our information, and contributing to this consistency and understanding of FSSC 22000. And by conducting webinars such as this, again, we hope that this helps the understanding and contributes to compliance and consistency. So already we are working with a number of the global organizations, many of whom that are using FSSC 22000. And as I mentioned, it provides a common platform. And many of the larger organizations are global. They have facilities all over the world. So it's important that they have a consistent system that is recognized and that can contribute both to sort of the development of their supply chain, their customer base, and everybody understands how the food safety is being managed. And again, this is where the ISO framework contributes, and FSSC 22000 helps with this consistency. So how does the ISO 22000 contribute to FSSC 22000? ISO 22000 is the common framework. It's the backbone. It provides the food safety management basis on which FSSC 22000 operates. And it outlines the requirements for management, communication, both externally and internally, and the requirements for continually improving the system. And because it's such a major part of FSSC 22000, the update of ISO 22000 is going to have significant implications on FSSC 22000. Supporting the management framework of ISO 22000 are the sector-specific prerequisite programs. So this allows us to cover the whole of the supply chain. ISO 22000 is applicable to all organizations, large and small, throughout the supply chain. So from farm to fork. In support of that, there are sector-specific requirements for different sectors of the supply chain. And obviously a requirement at the beginning of the supply chain to maintain hygiene, supply chain, and facilities and equipment is going to be different depending on the sector. And these are supported by ISO-based or independently available prerequisite programs. In addition to these two elements, there is also the FSSC 22000 requirements, which we are responsible for. So while ISO 22000 and the prerequisite programs are written by consensus and under review by global committees, the FSSC 22000 requirements are under our responsibility. And these are the requirements that provide our integrity program to ensure consistency, allow us to provide governance and management of the scheme. And it's these FSSC 22000 requirements that bring ISO 22000 into a format that is benchmarked by the GFSI. And that's why the requirement of all these three components make up FSSC 22000. And this allows FSSC 22000 to be GFSI benchmarked and provide that business-to-business advantage as well as the food safety management framework. And in addition, there is an optional module because of the ISO 22000 framework. It can be integrated with ISO 9000 for quality. So there is an additional voluntary quality module that is available, FSSC 22000Q, and that brings in the elements of the ISO 22000 and those integratable elements of 9001 to provide a complete food safety and quality certification program. So the scopes, as I mentioned, are supported by the prerequisite programs, and the original scopes of FSSC 22000 include food manufacturing, for which there is a prerequisite program, food packaging manufacturing, again, a separate relevant prerequisite program, animal feed production and farming. And we've recently added the new scopes, which include prerequisite program for the certification of transport and storage, for catering, and also for retail and wholesale. So this allows us the opportunity to cover more of the supply chain with a FSSC 22000 certification. And under the recent GFSI benchmarking, the scopes for transport and storage, food manufacturing, packaging, and animal feed production were benchmarked. So we're very pleased to offer that under GFSI. And as we build up on the additional scopes, these also will be incorporated into the GFSI benchmarking. We also talked about our dialogue with the regulators, and anyone who is in the US or outside of the US looking to import into the US is aware of the requirements of the Food Safety Modernization Act. And we have been concerned about helping our certified companies meet the requirements of the Food Safety Modernization Act. So there are requirements for achieving compliance and also for importation. So since the preventative controls rule has been introduced, we have been working on the alignment of FSSC 22000 against them. We have published an alignment which is available online, and we want to provide a tool that can help our companies to achieve compliance. And we've also recently produced a FSMA addendum. And in this FSMA addendum, for those companies that are FSSC certified or interested in becoming FSSC certified, then this provides a useful tool to see where the requirements of the Preventative Control Acts are a little bit more specific than are actually laid out in ISO 22000 or FSSC 22000, and brings your attention to those points where you probably could supplement your own food safety management system. And then there is a report addition that allows you to complete the audit report addition to provide the information that is required for supply chain verification. So rather than actually say that you, rather than confirming FSMA compliance, it's a tool that can help you achieve compliance, and while accompanying an FSSC 22000 audit report can help you meet your customers' demands for supply verification. Again, it's an ongoing thing. We will be revising this moving forward with the introduction of the ISO 22000 2018, but it provides a useful tool and should help all companies all over the world raise the standard of food safety management. So a quick word on the Global Markets Programme. As I mentioned, this is a starter program for small and medium organizations that provides the basis of food safety, the food safety management requirements. It provides a training to allow companies to appreciate what is needed to achieve certification, or the first steps of certification. And rather than providing certification, we provide a conformity assessment, which allows companies to show their customers that they are on the first step to certification. And some of the major retailers now for small and developing suppliers will accept global markets assessments. And it's just a good way of expanding food safety management, general improvement of food safety, and allowing small and enterprising companies to enter the supply chain without any compromising of food safety. So that, in a nutshell, I hope sets the stage for what FSSC 22000 is, how ISO 22000 contributes. And it's now my pleasure to hand over to Cor, who will talk about how the update of ISO 22000 will have implications on FSSC 22000. And I'm very pleased to introduce Cor Groenveld, who I think is in Shanghai, and I'm very pleased to introduce him. And Cor, thank you for staying up for us today, and I hand it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and always great to hear you talk about FSSC 22000, and absolutely clear that you are passionate about it, and I think we all are. And a warm welcome to everyone. I'm happy and I'm very pleased that that Eurofins gives us the opportunity to speak. Eurofins is one of our respected partners, and we're very happy to support them and you in your journey to improve food safety continuously. Yes, I'm from Shanghai now. I'm in China. Yeah, it's an amazing place. You will know. But I joined today the GFSI local group conference with 400 delegates from Asia. And I will do some other conference there. And next week I'm with Jacqueline in Chicago at the Food Safety Summit. And very happy to work together with Jacqueline and the other representatives to do the market development for FSSC. That's my responsibility. So please, let's go to the next slide. I cannot control the slides, so yeah, that's you're in China. You're not in control. That's what happens, you know. But yes, it works. So first of all, I think ISO 22000 was the choice for FSSC. FSSC does not write their own standards. They say we use international standards because international standards, ISO standards, they are based on democratic processes where experts from all over the world, also from the Americas, join together, and with the national standardization organizations, they develop international standards. And I think unique of FSSC is that ISO 22000 is applicable for the whole food supply chain. And here in China, they say from with a management system that supports you to ensure you control your own processes and the processes of your suppliers. Those technical specifications, also developed by ISO, they will cover the whole food supply chain. So Jacqueline already told you, we have a technical specification for prerequisite programs for each part of the food supply chain, also used by FSSC. And there is a risk-based and a focus on continuous improvement. So FSSC is not a list of requirements that you check the box and you say, listen, this is good, this is bad, this is good. No, it's really asking for responsibility from the food operator and for the food company to make sure that you have a very good risk analysis and that you identify what are the hazards and what are the significant hazards to control. So we believe in that an organization does that analysis, and we are not telling them this is a checklist that fits all. Because every food company is unique, and you have your unique hazards and unique lines, and you need to ensure that you find out how to control it. The new structure of FSSC of ISO 22000 is, I think, a great step forward. ISO decided to have the HLS, and I'll explain a little bit later, the high-level structure for all management system standards, and that makes it much more easier to have an integrated risk-based approach. So you can have a management system not only looking at food safety, but also looking at other risk areas like environmental risks, sustainability, occupational health and safety. And that integrated management system approach, we see that more and more companies are using that. And we think that the new version of ISO 22000 facilitates that. It's based on supply chain control. Because you can control your own processes, but many of the food scares, they start with your suppliers. So if you do not have a robust vendor assurance program, yeah, you can be in trouble. And ISO 22000 really focuses on that supply chain control, upstream and downstream. And last but not least, there's a huge international acceptance for ISO 22000 and also for FSSC. So next slide, please. Hey, it works. Thank you. So if you want to have a detailed information about the differences between the ISO 22000 and 2005, that was the first version. And I was involved since 2003 with ISO. So I was in the committee. So you can blame me if you don't like ISO, but I was in that committee since 2003. So I was with the first revision and also with the 2018 version. The big change that we made was that high-level structure. And the high-level structure is now a document with ISO that says all the management system standards, we want to have them to have the same main content. So they are much comparable with each other. So what you see is they all now support risk-based integrated management system. And also there's a change in the number of clauses that can be auditable. So in the old version, the 2005 version, we had we had 5 auditable clauses, and now we have 7. So that is a change. Also, I think that there's a much more logical sequence of the requirements. So when you look at it, you can really see it starts with leadership, it starts with resources, so all the things you need to have in place to make sure that you have a good food safety system, and then you can do your hazard analysis. And the process approach. I think all management system standards, also ISO 9001, ISO 14001, they focus on a process approach. And the reason for that is that all activities in an organization can be defined as a process with input, output, that kind of things. And if you identify your main processes and also how to control them, how to measure effectiveness, then I think you have a good approach looking at your activities. And one of the things that is important is that there's now a chapter called Operation, and all the management system standards of ISO have the same name for that chapter. And in that chapter, you find all the requirements for HACCP. And there is not a big change in that. The only thing is that now ISO 22000 talks about significant hazards, and I will give some explanation on that later. And there is one of the things that gives a lot of discussion, that is the OPRPs. And the OPRPs, I think is better explained now in the standard, but it might still be sometimes difficult for organizations to understand what is the difference between CCPs and OPRPs. So that is still something that we have to try to work on together. So next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? Can you still hear me? Yeah.
A bit of a lag. There we go.
Okay, thank you. If you're not used with the HLS structure, the high-level structure, then there might be a big difference when you see the new revision of ISO 22000. That's because that risk-based thinking is now on 2 levels, and we already have a risk-based approach on HACCP, of course. You do a hazard assessment, a hazard analysis. We all know that. But now an organization also has to do a business risk analysis. And we do not have a lot of time, but most important is that an organization has to look on a business level. What are the issues that we can have internally, externally? What can have a negative or positive influence on food safety? And what is happening outside of my organization? And based on that, and also on the interested parties, so all the interested parties, clients, but also suppliers, and also government, all kinds of organizations and their requirement, an organization has to do that business risk and analysis. And that is something quite new. So if you're not used to the HLS structure, that is something really to look into and make sure that you understand that requirement. We think that is good because, and I think most organizations already do that, because you look at your business risk and opportunities, but now you have to formalize it. And that might be something that can be a little bit of a challenge. Also, on the same 2 levels, there's the PDCA approach and the Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's an improvement cycle. You have to plan things before you can start. You have to do it. You have to check if you're still on track, and if you're not on track, you have to take action. So that is the explanation of the Plan, Do, Check, Act. You have to do it also on 2 levels, and I will show a picture from the standard later. But you can see that Plan, Do, Check, Act approach in the HACCP part of the standard, the operational part, but also in that organizational part. And there is a big change, I think, in definitions. And it might be a little bit scary. We have now 45 definitions, and 3 years in the food safety world. And I know that HACCP is not always easy. And we need to speak the same language on HACCP, especially when you are a larger organization. Make sure that your people understand what it means. What is a risk? What is a hazard? What is the acceptable critical limit of my end product? So all those terminologies are very important, and we have to make sure we speak the same language, and that's why definitions can help us. So okay, next slide, please. So what you see here is the content of the standard, and yeah, I will not go into all details, but you can see the first is more informative. It's about the scope, it's about references, the terms and definitions I talked about. And then the auditable chapters start with chapter 4 until 10. And I think it's that's why I said it's more logical sequence now. It starts first with what is the context of our organization. And in that part, you start with doing the identification of your interested parties, but also you are looking at internal, external issues that can positive or negative influence food safety. And that's a start where an organization needs to do. And there, I think it's very important that also leadership, and that's the next chapter, is involved. So that business approach is very much explained in chapter 4, in the first chapter. Leadership, I think requirements are more extensive, and I believe in that. And the word culture is, yeah, we talked about it, food safety culture, shall we put it in? It is not in the requirements, but it's in a note. So there is a note mentioning food safety culture. But if you look at the content of the chapter 5, you will recognize that it's really focused also on the culture in the organization. And I believe that's very important to make sure that the leaders of an organization from top management and all the layers, that they are strong and they make sure that there is awareness, engagement, accountability in organizations. And I think it's much stronger now in the new version. The planning chapter is all about that plan, do, check, act, and make sure that you make a plan, that you organize yourself, that you have everything in place. And chapter 7 is all about resources. And there's not a big change in that chapter. It's all about the resources that you need. It's your factory, it's your processes, it's your competent people, so all the resources you need. And then 8 is all about HACCP. So the whole HACCP, and still based on the Codex principles, they're still in, are all covered by chapter 8, operation. And then I think a big improvement is chapter 9 and 10, because that was one chapter in the past, but now we have chapter 9, because you can have the best system in place, but you need to look at the effectiveness. So chapter 9 is all about performance evaluation of the system on all levels. And then, of course, that is input for improvement, continuous improvement, covered by chapter 10. So that is what I mean with a quite logical sequence. And a nice thing, you find these chapters in all of the management system standards now of ISO. So 9001, 14001, they all have the same content of requirements. Next slide, please. Yeah, it still works. Just to give you an idea, this is the content of the old version, 2005. And if you look now at 2018, the new version, you can see that the difference that I just explained is context of the organization, leadership and planning. That was in the old chapter 4 and 5. Support was resource management. That is still, I think, the same content mainly. 7 was called planning and realization of safe products. That is now operation. The whole HACCP part is there. And 8 was one chapter, verification and improvement, and they're now in 2 chapters. So here you see how the standard has changed and how the chapters connect with the old revision of the standards. So next slide, please. And this is a lot of details, but you will receive PDF of this presentation. So I thought I cannot go through all these slides. It's too much. I just want to give you a flavor of a number of things. That context of the organization, that's totally new in the high-level structure. And here you see it. It's the external, internal issues relevant to the organization's purpose. So that really needs to have involvement with top management. That's absolutely needed. And also the needs and expectations of interested parties like clients, suppliers, governments, other interested parties. That is all covered in that chapter 4. I said already, chapter 5, much stronger. They talk about accountability now, accountability of the leaders. And also, I think you find a lot of cultural aspects there. So make sure we have good leaders in place to make people engaged, to make people committed. If you have happy employees, I think it's one of the most important things, because you can have the best system, the best processes, but if your people are not happy, will they work for you? Will they really be engaged and committed? So we believe strongly in that cultural aspect of an organization. And in 6, you see that those risks and opportunities, there is the requirement to do a business risk analysis on these things. And then you can go to the next slide. We go to resources, chapter 7. I hope the technique will work. Yeah. So 7 is all about support, all about resources that we need. Here you also find now requirements for documented information. That was in chapter 4 in the old standard, but yeah, it's also a resource. How to control documents in an organization, internal and external. And in 8 is all about HACCP. And the big change is, I think, the word significant. And it looks a simple change, but now the standard, and I will have a picture later, is very clear about the fact that if you identify significant hazards from your hazard assessment, your risk analysis, those significant hazards shall be controlled by OPRPs or CCPs. And there is no discussion. So significant hazards must be controlled by OPRPs or CCPs. And it's still, yeah, sometimes a little bit of a challenge to categorize them. But I come back to that a little bit later. The next one, please. And then 9, I said, it's all about performance evaluation on all levels. It's on the level of the monitoring of CCPs. That is a performance evaluation, but also internal audits is covered there. And even the verification of effectiveness, the verification of the HACCP system, what is input for the management review. And the management review is the highest level of performance evaluation, where involvement of top management is required. And then 10 is driving improvement. So it's all about corrective actions and that kind of things. So this is a little bit more detail about the standard. The Plan, Do, Check, Act and risk-based approach. I think that is the most important change, and especially when you're not really aware about the HLS. And this is a picture coming from the standard. So in the introduction of the standard, you find this picture. And I think it explains nicely how that 2 levels of organizational planning and control and operational planning and control is organized. So chapter 8 about operational operation is all about HACCP. I said it. So when you look at this and you know a little bit about HACCP, you recognize it. You have to do your analysis. You have to do the validation of control measures. So what you see here is that improvement cycle for HACCP. So all the steps are included, and it's fully based on the Codex principles. But on top of this picture, you can see we also have an improvement cycle, a Plan, Do, Check, Act, for the organizational planning and control. And that is all covered in the other chapters. And there is a connection with chapter 8, where if you identify any internal, external issues that have a high risk, or you have requirements for your interested parties that have a high risk, or an opportunity, it can also be an opportunity to improve. For instance, when there is a new technique, a rapid alert system, or there is a new technique for doing microbiological analysis, that can be an opportunity to improve. So it can be risks and opportunities, and you need to do that risk analysis to identify them. And for any risk and opportunity that is on a higher level, you need to control it. So that business analysis of risk and opportunities is totally new in the standard. So we can go to the next slide. Oh, here it is, the Deming circle again. Yeah, Plan, Do, Check, Act. Okay, you can click again. And this is then that part I talked about. So this is covered in the HLS structure. in all management system standards, looking at external issues, what happens outside, what can influence us positively, negatively, what are internal issues, what can influence internal our food safety, and what are the interested parties and their requirements. And that leads to risks and opportunities. And the next slide, if you, for all high-level risks and opportunities, you can click if you can, please. Yeah. So for all the risks and opportunities identified, you need to plan actions to control or use them, integrate them in the system, and then evaluate again if they work, and you need to change plans if they don't work. So this is the new approach on the business level for risks and opportunities. I will not go into the details of definitions. You see here there are some new definitions. Obviously, what happened is that all the things that were not in the old standard because of the high-level structure are now in the standard. And one of the things is that word significant. You did not find it in the 2005 version. So the significant food safety hazard, yeah, the word significant is new. It's not rocket science, but I think it makes it more clear. So the next slide, please. And most important, again, and I think one of the most difficult things is the CCPs and the OPRPs. And yeah, as I said, any significant hazard shall be controlled either as a CCP. You see the difference in the definitions because they're underlined. So I always try to explain it in my own words because otherwise I do not understand it. And what I say, listen, if you have a significant hazard like metal and you have a metal detector, well, all the products go through the metal detector. You can have a critical limit, you can control it, and you can take corrective action when it's not under control. So it's really a step in the process that you really is dedicated to control that hazard. But sometimes you have significant hazards like glass, and when you do not have an X-ray machine, yeah, then perhaps you cannot have that specific control measure in place, and you have a combination of control measures, and that is what often are the OPRP. So a combination of control measures that is also controlling that significant hazard, but is perhaps not that one specific measure in place like a metal detector. It is, I think, a little bit more clear now in the standard, but still, I think we need to learn from each other how to define it. Most important for me is if you have a significant hazard, you shall control it, and there may be a gray area between CCPs and OPRPs as long as you control it and you show by verification that your control is effective. That is most important. Next slide, please. Sorry. Yeah, and this is, I think, a summary of what I said. And what you recognize here is the whole HACCP approach. You can click one more down, then we have the full picture. So here you see the HACCP approach. Oh, it's another click. Yeah, sorry for that. But here you see the whole approach and also the chapters related in the standards. So it starts with your preliminary steps, the PRPs. You have to do your hazard identification. What are the potential hazards, biological, physical, chemical, and then you do your hazard assessment. And that leads to significant hazards. And still, the hazard assessment shall be based on occurrence and severity of the hazard. And that comes to a risk level. And the methodology is still not described. You can choose your own methodology, as it was also in the previous version. But it leads to significant hazards, and they shall be controlled by either CCPs or OPRPs. And those control measures shall be validated, looking at the capability, if the control measure is capable to control the significant hazards. So I think this is an overview that explains again the HACCP principles and also the chapters of the standard where the requirements are covered. The next slide, please. Yeah, and the yellow part is then important. Okay, yeah. Significant hazards shall be controlled as CCPs and OPRPs. Yeah. So now the transition process of FSSC 22000. So you can see that in the next slide. I wait for the next slide. Yeah. So you can click again. We will go to version 5. That is the next version of FSSC 22000. The current version is version 4.1, as you probably know. So can you click, please? Most important, of course, is that we integrate the changes from ISO 22000. That is now what we are doing. And we did the gap analysis. You can find the detailed gap analysis between version 2005 and 2018 on our website. It's an Excel sheet. You can download it for free. So if you want to have more detail about the differences between the two versions, just go to our website and download that Excel sheet for free. And it's very detailed for the real guys and girls who are interested. But also what we want to do is to make sure that the integrated management system approach is more supported by us. And we call it FSSC quality. And I sometimes say it's more like FSSC QMS. It is having an integrated management system combining food safety and quality management. But that's still a voluntary module. So we are still focused on food safety, but organizations that want can also join that integrated management system approach with ISO 9001. Excuse me. So what we will do is look at the requirements, and we have some additional requirements that might now be covered by ISO 22000. And there is one requirement about the control of services, and it might be some of the changes we will make because one of our additional requirements might be covered now by the standard itself. The certified organizations, yeah, especially when the high-level structure, if you're not used to it, yeah, that might be a change for you. If you're already used to the high-level structure, I think the changes are less significant. But otherwise, yeah, that might be something that you need to look at. For the certification bodies, we expect, of course, they train their auditors. They make sure that they are competent. We have very good certification bodies. But that is something we will also review. And then I think for the foundation itself, yeah, we need to make sure that the high-level audits that our certification bodies perform, that they are remained. So we will work closely together with the certification body to ensure that they are delivering the program on the high level that is required. Because most important is that certification is reliable and that we have certificates there that are really having a meaning. And that is our main purpose. So if you look at the time frame, the next picture shows a time frame. So at the moment we have a plan for the revision, and that plan, the objective is to have in May 2019 our version 5 available. So then we will try to publish our version 5, where the new revision of ISO 20000 is fully incorporated. Then the CBs have the opportunity from there to get their renewed accreditation, because that's normal. CBs need to be accredited by accreditation bodies like ANEP in the US, and the accreditation bodies are all over the world, and they will have then from June till December, end of December, to have that renewed accreditation. And then we say the audits against the new standard can start from the 1st of January 2020. We just want to set a date because we do not want to have competition between the certification bodies. So if the certification bodies are ready and they got the time between June and December 2019, the first audits can start not earlier than 1st of January 2020, and then for the transition until 19 June, and that is set by the accreditation bodies and by the IAF. That's the International Accreditation Forum, and we follow the rules of them because they say also for ISO 20000, that's the final date that the old standard cannot be used anymore. So we will follow that. So this is now our plan, and we try to
in the testing environment. We're also moving in that direction on the food safety services solutions as well. So providing not only auditing, training, and consulting. So if there is assistance needed in health, out something that you really be able to those. I don't want to take up too much more time. I know we've only got about 7 minutes that we have. Is go forward and buy the new standard. It's available on the ISO store or for us in the US, Week Store as well, where you can buy it off of there. The slide presentation will have just that stand within your. The next thing to do, really to look at, is really understanding the plan already in place, and you might not know it. One of the challenges I think that we have in some parts of the world is really understanding how to do the plan, check, act cycle. Remember, planning is really recognizing an opportunity to plan a change within your system. Your doing is testing that change, testing that modification, and carrying out potentially a small-scale study on that front. The checking is reviewing the test and analyzing results and identify what you've learned from that particular action. And acting is taking action based on what you learned from that study step or from that check step. Learning if the change didn't work, do you need to go back through the cycle? And even if it did work, how can you improve that system? So really, it's an endless cycle. It's an endless circle that continuously goes, which is driving that continuous improvement thought process that we really want to have in place. If you want to think about it in a relatively simple terms, when we're looking at it on a food safety management system or quality management system cycle, the internal audit section is really looking at that check phase of what's being done, the corrective action processes is that action phase at points. And then really the planning and doing is going to be where your changes are determined and then implemented within your system resources if you're and going through your food safety management system. What changes do you need to do in order to meet all of the requirements now of 2018? How can you implement that? How do you need to modify some slight roles and responsibilities potentially within your system? A key point that I do want to point out here, though, and I see it is somewhat a fault when I go out and I visit facilities, is they want to number their programs specifically to what a standard has. You're more than welcome to do that if you want, but remember, that is not the main concern for an auditor. It is really the design and the implementation of your system really that is of concern. So the proof is more so in the pudding that we want to see. It's really, we want the substance, not necessarily the style. So ensure that you have that management system, that plan, do, check, act cycle, that HLS really embedded into your system, and you're able to demonstrate it on that front. And really the last thing to look at in some of the questions you may have is respect that senior management really that cycle that and it is a hard stop at the end of that. Sometimes we end up putting in new systems in place, or the certification audits come through and be that check on that front. That isn't really the intent of what that certification audit is for. It's really on your end to show that your management system is adequately designed and implemented, and you need to demonstrate that you are evaluating it on that side. Make sure you have those records to show that driving improvement and the results that are pulling off of that internal audit on that end. That's really the most of what I've got. So what I'll do is I'll hand it back over to Genevieve here. But thank you, everybody, for all your time. And again, thank you for Cor and Jacqueline for taking part in this.
All right, thank you, Cor, Jacqueline, and Kris for your presentations. We are butting up against time for you. If you submitted one of your questions and try to answer it for you through email. Thank you so much. That a recording available to you within 3 business by the end of this week. Thank you, everyone, for attending. All right, bye.
Are you still there, Genevieve?
Hi, this is Cor.
Hey, Cor, great job. Thank you very much for everything. So hopefully everything is going well.